Hey there, this is the Resistor Vic podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance and episode 11 of the Resistor Vic podcast. I'm here tonight with Steve Anderson. I'm going to introduce him and hopefully have what I think is going to be a very engaging and interesting conversation. Before I get there, though, I want to make a couple of notes. One, for those of you who have asked me about getting t-shirts, if you go to resistorvic.com, RESISTOR, Vic.com, that'll take you to the site where you can buy t-shirts. DC occupation. I made a video when I got home from work tonight to talk about this, so I'm not going to give you all the gory details. But I've got a different take than I've heard others give on the whole DC occupation thing. Look who came to dinner. I love this picture that I was able to pull. So Donald Trump and Putin met in Alaska today. And for those of you who are listening and not watching, I'm showing a picture of Putin with a shit-eating grin on his face next to Donald Trump looking like he just went to the principal's office. Reminds me very much of Donald Trump's first term when he went to Helsinki and came out of that meeting looking like he'd just been spanked. So it'll be interesting if we're able to get the details of what was talked about. I haven't had time to read a lot on how that meeting went, except that Putin said they had an agreement and Trump immediately said, no, we don't. So there's that. And then a headline that my wife told me about over dinner. I hadn't seen this. She said that the latest thing is the Republicans, the White House, is trying to say that it's actually Hunter Biden who had a lot of dealings with Epstein and that Hunter Biden needs to be prosecuted for what he did with Epstein. To which I say, great, let's have an investigation. Let's have a trial. Let's see the evidence. Wouldn't that be grand? Somehow, I don't think it's going to be Hunter that's named. Could be, and if it is, shame on him, prosecute him. But I'm more interested in seeing all the other oligarchs, especially one in particular. So we'll see how that goes over time. But we're here to talk to Steve Anderson. He describes himself as a software engineer watching the slow motion train wreck of the Republic as it descends into madness. Welcome, Steve, and thank you very much for joining.
Thank you. I discovered you on YouTube before I even started working on Substack and was happy to see you over here.
Yeah, I think I found you on Substack. Maybe you reached out to me in a comment on YouTube. Is that how I found you?
Once or twice, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you did.
Here on Substack.
I wish I could write as well as you do. Folks, if you're listening, Steve writes about the oligarchy and fascism, and it's brilliant writing, and he doesn't just throw his opinions out there. He's digging into actual history and actual events in today's time, and if you're needing something to read, you should definitely make this a part of your morning coffee. So how did you get into writing about all this stuff?
I had a hobby that led me to touch into human psychology over the course of the pandemic when there wasn't any work to do. And the more I learned about that, the more I started to recognize what a lot of things that were going on in our political stage over that whole course of time. And it's the psychology and the history that I write about. When you read my stuff, you probably are thinking that I am writing about politics and I'm writing political papers, but mostly I think I'm writing about history and about psychology because I'm trying to understand what's going on myself. And I figure if I've got these questions, probably other people have these questions, even if they don't realize what the questions are yet.
And just for clarification and so that people don't think, oh, who's this guy to be writing about psychology? It's not like you just guess about the psychology involved, right?
Oh, no, not at all. a lot of the time during that period, I was working with a couple of people who are educators and have a strong background in psychology, and I've learned from them about that.
You know, you didn't mention the thing that got you into looking at all this, and I really hope that you don't mind
I
mentioning
don't
that.
mind.
Oh,
No.
tell everybody what you told me about how you got started in this kind of uh, it, research, if you will.
All right. People are going to laugh. This is kind of funny, but a friend of mine likes to say everybody needs a hobby. I live in the Pacific Northwest, and a huge part of the culture around the Pacific Northwest is Bigfoot, Sasquatch. And I started to get interested back into what was going on with that topic in about 2019 or so. And I started digging into it, and I realized that the parallels between what was going on with Bigfoot world was amazingly similar to religious cults.
Imagine
and
that.
that's where I started trying to learn about the psychology, and that's where I run into the professionals that I was working with to kind of understand things and do some experiments to try to draw people out of their own particular form of madness and try to get people more interested in real science and real investigative techniques.
I think it's fascinating, the whole observation of the cult-like behavior and then the religious cult-like behavior, how it's similar.
It also taught me a lot about the populations. In my new publication, uh, I started it off with a short series about psychology and about the use of the internet. And in the second episode of that series, I have some charts. Those charts were actually made for a video essay I did for Bigfoot World, which looked at the total population of social media users in the entire world, and then the number that are just in America, and then the number involved in this particular subject. And different subjects will have different populations, but this is a perfect example. And then the number of people who are really, really serious in social media about really understanding, being scientific, being thorough, being objective, is very, very small. And the number of people who are actually influencing on that level isn't even enough to discolor a single pixel in that chart.
Do you see any parallels with what you're talking about and politics or people's behavior in politics?
In social media, in politics, there are some things that are far more extreme than you find in religious ideas or even in Bigfootery, and that is the rage machines, the endorphin pumping machines that tell you about all the things you need to be mad about. They never offer any solutions, any ideas. They never tell you what to do about it. They just tell you what to be mad about. The right has been doing that for decades, and we see where it goes there. And after this most recent election, the left rage machines started to kick into full gear. And they've been going for a while, but the people who are grifting off clicks, just making people angry about Trump and about any of his sycophants.
It's funny you should say that. That what I mentioned at the beginning about my different take on DC.
Mm-hmm.
It, I think you'll enjoy it because I talk about the whole anger thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I personally, having read Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny, find you similar, and I'm wondering who influences you the most in your writings about fascism and the oligarchy.
Actually, no one in particular, to be honest. Learning about the history, the way I learned to write technical reports as an engineer.
So you're able
Uh,
to disassociate the emotional part of it a little bit?
I hadn't heard the word honestly in this use until quite recently, but I seem to be a kind of a natural born stoic.
Nice.
I worry about the things that I can affect. I try to be aware of what else is going on, to be aware of what the largest threats are and what the major threats are. But if I don't have a path to do anything about it, I try not to waste my energy worrying about it.
Those are very wise words. I can tell you from the comments I get in my videos that there's a lot of people that aren't coping well with the fear and the anger and the wondering where we're going and what's going to happen. So I hope they're listening now and hear what you just said, because it really doesn't do a lot of good to spend too much time getting angry and fearful about it all.
Certainly not fearful. Be angry. Use that anger. Go out and do something. There are groups that organize protests, things like that. Contact them. Reach out to them.
That's one of the things I tell them. One of the great stress relievers is action. If you're feeling very stressful about all the stuff that's going on, best thing you can do is relieve some of that stress by getting involved and being active somehow.
Also, from the Stoic standpoint, when you can, worry about the stuff you can worry about, do what you can, and do some good in the world.
A wise person once told me, don't trouble until trouble troubles you. And I think those are very good words to live by when you can. What do you see as the two big threats right now to, with everything that's going on with Trump and things like occupying DC and Project 2025? Are there two particular ideas that you see that we need to be worrying about?
Well, the one we all see is fascism. And our nation has had a particular fascination with fascism since before it was even a word. And that had its starts here around a century ago now and leading up into World War II. But the thing that I think people are less conscious of these days is a lot of people want to call it plutocracy. I'll call it a plutocratic oligarchy. I've been calling it the soft oligarchy because it's almost invisible. They hide behind the illusion of democracy, and they've been stripping away the protections and the standards that kept the government in more control. I don't even think relative control is a safe word to use. The government got a good foothold in 1933 with FDR with the New Deal. And the rise of World War II blocked a lot of actions against the New Deal because a lot of them sounded fascism, and at least briefly, fascism went out of style. And then in the early 1970s, and then very much more during the Reagan years, they got a much stronger hold over the system. And if you watch what AOC and Sanders are talking about in their Fight Oligarchy tour, they're not talking about fighting fascism. They're talking about fighting the oligarchy. And I think the really good strategy behind that is the oligarchy is the money path and the control path that has enabled fascism to break out so strongly this time in America. And if you destroy the oligarchy, the fascism goes away.
It sounds like if there was another ism besides fascism that the oligarchy liked better, then we would be fighting that instead of fascism, but we would still have the oligarchy there.
Almost certainly, yes. Yeah. Now, the other thing, I think there are a lot of them that aren't necessarily fascist, but they like their wealth and they like their flavor of narcissism. They like being in power. And they also know that if you watch Russian history, oligarchs tend to die under fascism. They fall out of the windows of tall buildings and things like that.
And I noticed that you didn't say anything about Republican versus Democrat. You're not saying it's only the Republicans that are going to fascism are serving the oligarchy. You didn't say anything remotely close to any of that.
I'm very centrist personally. However, historically, what has been the Conservative Party, and that switched in the late 1800s into the 1900s. The Democratic Party was the Conservative Party in the Deep South, and around the time of the Great Depression, the roles of the parties started to reverse, and the Republicans became the more conservative party over time, and the Democrats became the more progressive party. So yes, Lincoln was a Republican. Lincoln was a progressive.
And those are the today's Republicans hate to admit that.
Yeah. They're happy to stand on the name of Lincoln, but they hate progressives.
Yeah. It's, well, to be fair, the power players in the Democratic Party seem to hate progressives too.
Oh, yes. I'd say the oligarchy hates progressives, and the oligarchy has its hands on the money that controls both the Republican and the Democratic parties. The Republican Party, the Conservative Party, has tended towards the authoritarianism and the fascism historically.
Is there a time that you've noticed when you were studying where we were the closest to breaking free of oligarchy?
The New Deal was a good start. It happened right after the collapse of an economic cycle. And people are talking about we're in late stage capitalism. We are in the collapse of an economic cycle right now. And, if there's a third enemy, let's spin back to complacency.
Oh, excellent.
And after the war, during the war, there were a number of economic policies that were adopted that made it easy for allied countries to keep operating even during the heavy expense of war. And they increased economic aid, and they increased protections of the public good. And those stayed in place until the early 70s, where Nixon took them out, probably out of the political interests of someone who had a lot of money who suggested that would be a good idea.
Funny how that works. Now, I noticed that you've mentioned the FDR era, and you mentioned the Nixon now and Reagan eras. What have you found about the 50s when Eisenhower was in there and he's like, no, we're going to have a top tax rate very high. We're going to tax the rich and we're going to build highways and stuff.
That was extending a lot of the New Deal sort of policies, the building of infrastructure to build up the capacity for commerce in the country. And wages went up, productivity went up. I should say that the other way around. Productivity went up, and wages went up with productivity. After Nixon reversed those policies, productivity and wages started to decouple.
Mm-hmm.
Productivity continued to go up. We continued to get more efficient, more productive, more wealthy society, but less of that wealth was being shared with the people.
And that's why my kids have a harder time today than I did when I was their age. I hear people all the time. I was walking past a couple of old guys in the grocery store the other day, older than me. And they were talking about how they have relatives who just don't want to work. And I'm always running into people, these young kids don't want to work. And I point out to them, look, my kid went to community college. He got skilled as a mechanic, and he's been working his butt off since he left school. He's 28 now, and he has never been able to make enough money as a mechanic. He's not a bad mechanic. He's never been able to make enough money to actually support himself in terms of paying rent and paying electricity and water and all that stuff. There's just not enough money. And his billionaire boss is driving super fancy cars, but he doesn't make enough as a mechanic to do that. So he will finally walked away from being a mechanic, I'm glad to say. But I guess the point is, that's why young people are having a hard time. And it's not that they don't want to work. I kind of went off on a tangent there because you triggered me.
Not that much of a tangent, really. It's the extraction nature of our current economy. And when you're working largely to enrich someone else, even if you don't realize it, you know your job is relatively unsatisfying and you're not getting the rewards that you feel like you ought to for doing something that is useful to society and contributing. And when you don't get that, where's your encouragement to find work that you enjoy and like to do? You don't have it.
No, I mean, my kids tell me all the time.
Instead, we have work or die.
My kids tell me all the time. He's like, Dad, I'm not going to bust my ass for somebody and live to work. I'm not going to go to work every day to a job and give them my all and then never be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And I totally get that. He saw me work. We've never gone on a family vacation. We've never had the opportunities to do those kind of things. We did okay, just not well enough to do all that, let's go to Disney thing. And now his generation has it so much worse that, if he has kids, he recently got married. If they have any kids, I don't know if they would ever be able to do even the little bit that we did with our kids. So do you think, is there hope based on the things that you've read? What do we need to do to get out from under the oligarchy?
Well, we have a couple of ways forward. We can let things go the way they are because, like I said, we are in the beginning of a collapse of the economic cycle. This was becoming apparent in economic indicators that used to be published in the early 2000s. And when they started to show really seriously concerning signs, they were deprecated as no longer really necessary and meaningful to the way our economy is working now.
Well, are you telling me that Trump's the guy that he wants to be the new what's it called, the FSB, the Federal Statistics Bureau person? He fired that gal the other day.
Okay, Bureau of Labor Statistics, FSB, is the Russian police.
BLS. All right. I hate.
You got Putin on the brain.
Yeah. But the person that he's nominating to replace him yesterday or the day before said, well, we think we need to just stop publishing these numbers. Are you telling me that's not the first time that's happened?
That is not remotely the first time it's happened. Now, this is the stupidest reason for it to happen. Before, they've been at least a little more honest. But those indicators weren't useless. The indicators were telling you, if you knew how to read them, that things were starting to get bad.
And versus...
And they continued.
They continue to get bad, but now they're like, well, we're just not going to release the numbers because Trump don't like them.
Right.
Right.
Now, one of the things I have said in more than one place across essays and some of the video essays before I started writing, because writing is just plain faster than video production, is America is still one of the most inventive and productive societies in the history of the world. I honestly think that if enough people wake up to understand what's going on, we could possibly, for the first time in history, stop an economic collapse, have a smooth landing, and move into real productive life.
And how do we do that?
First step.
$1 million question, huh?
Yeah. First step, we do have to stop the oligarchy and the policies that they have put into the way the government operates that siphon the money away from the people to them. Why should, as Sanders says, why should 90% of the population of America work to give most of what they actually produce for the society to the top 1%?
It seems like such a simple question with such an obvious answer, being they shouldn't. And it baffles me that more Americans don't take that question seriously.
Right now, I am writing a series about the think tanks. They weren't called think tanks back in 1933 in FDR time, but there were organizations that were pooled resources by the wealthy to influence public thinking, to make your manager's freedom critical to national freedom.
Okay,
Ideas like that.
I want you to hold that thought for just a second because I want to put your Substack page up here. For those of you who are watching, for those who are listening, go to Substack, look up Steve Anderson. It's at sanderson1581. If you're interested in reading the stuff that we're talking about right now, I strongly encourage everybody to go and subscribe to his page so that you get his posts. Okay, where were we?
And to add to that, where I'm doing most of these postings is in the publication Reclaiming the American Republic.
Okay. I mean, when you first get in there and start reading his stuff, either do it on a day where you don't have a lot of time because you're going to get sucked in and you're going to want to just keep reading and reading. And then, you'll get to a point you can realize that I can read one of these every morning because you purposely make them short enough that you don't have to invest an hour of your day to read them, right?
That's absolutely my aim. Most of the time I'm aiming for about a 5 to 8 minute read that completely contains one particular idea and then move on to the next day.
There you go. So if we let's play a fantasy game here. Suppose that we did manage to come back from the brink and keep this economic collapse from happening, which I'm very skeptical of. But suppose we did. And suppose we were actually smart enough as a country to elect a Bernie Sanders type progressive that would address the issues that need addressed the most.
And find one that's willing to run.
Yeah. How do we go forward, and what are the warning signs that they're getting too much power in too few hands?
First of all, having rules that reward malignant narcissism in management and think that's clever management style or efficient management style, as opposed to simply finding a way to take the most from the most people you can. FDR's New Deal was probably one of the best basic frameworks that we've had historically, and it hurt them. In fact, their first response was something that a lot of people have probably never heard of in American history called the business plot, which was actually an attempt to coordinate a military coup using organizations of veterans to form a military that was supposed to depose FDR and put more reasonable business people in charge.
I'm trying to think of it. I've made a couple of videos about it. You're not talking about the World War I veterans that marched on Washington?
No.
No. Okay. Good.
No, this was discovered. One of the veterans that was he a veteran or a general at the time? I'm terrible with that. I was terrible at history, honestly, which is why learning about this is so interesting to me. But he realized what he was being asked to do, and he reported it to Congress.
Oh, what a concept.
And, yeah. And they had hearings. They brought him in and interviewed him, and they had their investigation. And it was quietly just kind of buried.
Huh. Yeah, these days, if one of our generals went to Congress, they would put him in Epstein's cell.
Yeah.
We a minute ago, we talked about if we could find the right kind of candidate. So given Gavin Newsom, did you see Gavin Newsom's press conference yesterday?
I did not. I kind of have the animal spirits of it.
Yeah, actually had a chance to sit and watch it all. Very powerful, very hopeful, and I remain skeptical until I actually see them with a ballot measure on the November ballot. I'm not going to believe it. But people are all over the internet saying Newsom's the guy. Newsom is the one to stand against Trump. And I understand where some people are feeling that. He did show what so many Democrats haven't been showing, which was a way, what's the word I'm looking for? A strategy for fighting back. And I loved what he had to say about all them colleges that are buckling under and giving in to Trump.
Mm-hmm.
But the question remains for me, let's suppose he is the candidate. Let's suppose he does wipe the floor with whatever Republican runs. Is he going to be the guy to bring us a progressive change for the future? That's what I have my doubts about.
I think I could agree there. And this is where I would say in every single jurisdiction in this country, in every precinct that votes, look at your candidates from the school board all the way up and look at if they support their voters or moneyed interests. Look at their policies and look at the things going on. Just down the hill from where I live right now, someone has had the great idea that they want to put an asphalt factory within about 100 feet of the river that is the water supply for a lot of the communities around here. Isn't that a great idea?
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you said that, because not about the asphalt factory, but about at every level, looking at your candidates. My video that's going to post tomorrow is about how many progressive candidates are out there and trying to run and not getting the support. We have so many people making noise on the internet about how we have to get these progressive candidates. We've got to support them. We need change. We need a different direction. We need a New Deal, if you will. And yet there's all these progressive candidates out there who are trying to be that change that we're talking about. And people aren't putting up. They're not backing up their complaints.
The DNC is not paid to support them.
Right. Yeah.
And you've talked about that a little bit, and what you've been talking about, the idea of a grassroots revolution, starting from the home and working the way out, the local and state committees, and take back the Democratic Party and make it the party of the people. Because in a lot of places you'll find that the Democrats have taken someone, either a local Democrat who's not as popular, or even an outside Democrat, you've talked about this a few times yourself, and brought them in to replace a popular local candidate.
Yep. That would be Hickenlooper and Bennett, both of my U.S. senators. Andrew Romanoff, fantastic candidate. Excellent example of a true representative of the working class. He didn't just represent his House district up there in northern Colorado. He represented all the working people in the state and did a great job. But both times he tried to run for Senate, it was the National Party who squashed him like a bug. And don't get me started on that, because I can talk about that all night. It makes me mad.
It doesn't happen everywhere. The district I'm in, the representative is very responsive. He's been there for a lot of years. But even when we had some trouble during the pandemic and had some difficulties with our getting our health insurance renewed, he's the one that actually reached out and got involved in the system and got our paperwork corrected.
And who's that?
That's Adam Smith.
Nice. So one of the things, when you were talking earlier about FDR and the New Deal, one of the things that I've always been fascinated by was FDR didn't come from a poor background. He was a member of one of the wealthiest families in the country at the time. And one of the things that I've always admired was this oligarch you would think, guy who got into power and said, you know what? It's not about me. It's about the American people. And I'm wondering if we will ever find somebody like that again, because I fear that every candidate we have is going to be a millionaire from here on out.
Yeah, could be. Some people are called to the tasks that they do. I have observed in the population of billionaires that we have that how you came upon your money can make a lot of difference. If you look at someone like J.B. Pritzker, for example, he hasn't worked at extracting wealth from people his entire life. He inherited his fortune, and he was probably brought up with good education and good values, and he never needed to worry about where the money came from or how to keep it coming in. And I don't think any of that rubbed off on him, because
I
when
don't
you
either.
listen to him, he talks a lot about defending democracy. And could that just be a front to keep him popular with the right side of history? Could
Yeah.
be.
I think he answered that the
Could
other
it be
day.
genuine? Could be.
He told me everything I needed to know about him the other day when he had that press conference hammering Mamdani. It's like,
Oh, he came down on that side, huh?
yeah, he had a press conference sitting at a table with a bunch of books and a bunch of other people and started talking. He equated Mamdani's community-owned grocery stores or state-owned grocery stores. He equated that with communism. And I'm like, really, guy? Come on. You're supposed to say, I'm a Democrat, he's a Democrat, and Mamdani's obviously for working people.
Yeah.
And if J.B. Pritzker wanted to keep my vote, then he could have said, yeah, I'm supporting this guy.
That is news I hadn't had yet, but it is an element of an answer to that question, isn't it?
It is. It most definitely is. My theory, because he hasn't announced for president yet, I'm sure he's going to sooner or later. My theory on why he attacked Mamdani is because AIPAC is attacking Mamdani. Everybody that AIPAC is paying in Congress, there was it today or yesterday? Hakeem Jeffries was given an opportunity once again to endorse Mamdani. And he gave a long, rambling, I am definitely not going to answer this question answer. And you look at at Jeffries on the AIPAC tracker, and he's one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for, beneficiaries of AIPAC money in New York. I think he even gets more than Schumer does, but don't hold me to that. It's been a few days since I looked at that.
Oligarchy approved.
So if you could change one moment in American history that got us to where we are today, what would it be?
I think Reagan was probably the biggest direction shift, but I honestly don't know if changing that would have changed or merely delayed the course we're on now. Because let me spin back to that complacency thing that I mentioned before. Where I am, my income level, and the people around and above me, we're not feeling a lot of the pain yet. Yeah, we're looking for deals on big purchases and things like that, but we're not squeezed. And I know about this stuff because of that silly Bigfoot hobby, where I got out into rural Washington and really met people and interacted with people and got to understand things about the way our system has worked in ways that I had never seen from my comfortable home in the suburbs of Seattle.
It's very interesting to me that you said Reagan, because so many people think of Reagan as the turning point, but not many people think of whether or not it really matters that much because of the trajectory, the overall trajectory that we were on. And I think this is a great place for you to talk about that graph we were discussing before we push the record button.
Okay, well, and you can slip a link into that essay here. One of the things I tried to figure out just for the fun of it is how much in this, for the last few years, we heard $50 trillion a lot from Bernie Sanders, how much the oligarchy has taken from us. Well, the Rand Corporation updated that recently to more like $80 trillion. Now, we had a local radio announcer who ridiculously tried to describe large amounts of money in terms of stadium units, a stadium unit being $500 million. But $80 trillion is tens of thousands of $500 million stadiums. It's a ridiculous amount of money. But how
It's like
much
trying to imagine how many stars are in the sky.
Yeah. But how much of that money has actually been taken from you as an individual is what I worked out in this essay. And a few weeks before that, I took a quick, simple stab at it, and I was never satisfied with that answer because I took too many shortcuts. So this time I sat down and I really tried to do the math. And if your median income, this chart, based on the year that you were born, will estimate how much money has been extracted from your productivity, not your wages, your productivity, what you have produced for society. You never saw any of this money because Nixon started the decoupling of productivity and wages. Reagan accelerated it. But this money has been taken from your productivity.
Let me see if I can put it into words. Let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay. So I worked for 20 years building widgets. And for 20 years, I started out at, say, minimum wage, and I got pay raises every now and then. And after 20 years, I was making, say, $30 an hour. So I don't know what that would equate to over 20 years, how much money I made. But you're not talking about how much I made compared to how much they made.
Right.
You're talking about how much they profited off of my work.
Correct. Now you can roughly equate it to median income. So what was your income over that period of time compared to the median income? And you can scale it with that sort of idea. Because this is a broad brush thing, and the broad brush isn't necessarily super accurate, but I feel like it's pretty accurate for where my wife and I are right here in our lives. We were born in the mid-'60s, and for each of us, that number is right around $700,000 has been taken from our productivity and given to the wealthy. Aren't we generous?
You're such a nice guy. You're such a giving guy.
We could have some of that for ourselves, but it was so much more important to give it to the rich.
Yeah, well, they need another yacht.
Yeah. Their yacht needs another yacht.
There you go. They all want the one that has a little boat that comes out of the bottom, the small boat, so they can go water skiing. You can't pull a skier with a big yacht, right? Yeah. So we need to get them the little boat.
And again, based on the median income, this year, the last chart in that essay looks at how much is probably extracted from you around median income for this year, $25,000
for a year.
This year, yep.
Wow. When you put it into just a year, and you say it's $25,000, I'm sitting here thinking, let's see, after I pay health insurance, after I pay taxes, I don't think I make $25,000 a year.
Yeah. Now, think about this, though. This has been happening over the last 40 years, and it's been accelerating. They've been taking more and more and more. The financialization of things, we talked about speculation on the housing market as another way to financialize the economy. These are last stage efforts to extract money from the people. But we have relatively good incomes on the average across the society. Think about the people who have less income, who have less wealth, less money to their names. They're probably having less extracted based on their productivity, but it's a much larger percentage of their income compared to what's been taken from us as a percentage of our net worth. And I should say net worth rather than income in this case.
So that makes me curious, because I just mentioned how much, I mentioned my healthcare. So when you're talking about how they're extracting from us, we're not simply talking about our employers extracting wealth from our productivity, if I understand you. So the insurance company that I pay $900 every 2 weeks for my health insurance, that money is going up to the investors in United Health.
Yes,
and
it is.
So United Health is extracting wealth from my productivity too, not just my employer.
Ooh, United Wealth. Yeah.
That's about right.
Yes, and that's certainly one part of the extraction process. Our health insurance industry is terrible, and they have so many people that they have hired for the sole purpose of figuring out how they can deny claims and prevent outflow. And that's profitable to them, to hire someone to make that no pay decision.
Have you done a chart or anything on the different ways that they're extracting wealth out of our productivity? Like our employers, our insurance?
That I haven't actually. Now, our employers are making a lot of that money in the sale of products that we produce, depending on, where we are in the society and what we're building, what widgets we're building. That's all part of the economy. That gets taxed too. And that all of those taxes, all of that goes into the system. And how much benefit do we see from that is the thing. In the 50s and 60s, a lot of that money also came from the big guys, because they were getting taxed up to 90% in some cases at some points in that period. All of that went into public goods. That paid for all the jobs in, like, the CCC in the earlier days, the jobs that built the freeways, that built the infrastructures,
electrified rural America.
Yeah, all of that.
Okay, so question. I'm thinking there's so many cases that what I call the Trump tax, what Trump calls the big beautiful bill, as an example, the way they took money from us to give tax breaks to the billionaires and the millionaires, does that count as a part of the process of extracting our wealth for the wealthy?
Absolutely, and it's an acceleration of that process. The money that was allocated for things like Social Security, things like Medicare, was money that is supposed to be spent on the public good. Not spending it on the public and also reducing the taxes to the rich, it's not exactly just handing them the money, but if you do the math, it's handing them the money.
There you go.
You're not taking from them, and you're not paying out.
Yeah. We're getting on an hour now. Do you have any more last words about that particular idea? Is there anything that you didn't want to leave out? I got one more question for you. That's not related to that.
Okay, well, one of the things we talked about before, and I started to get there, talking about the extraction and how much money has been taken from people. I felt this talking to the people in rural Washington, that they've been squeezed. They feel it. They're in economic dire circumstances, far more than the people in the suburbs, far more than the people who have had more lucrative jobs in wealthier parts of the country. And they started to raise the alarm when these policies started happening decades ago. And I wrote about this in the first 4 elements of my series on the oligarchy. The basic qualities from the American Constitution were no longer meeting, were no longer serving them. And they tried to raise the alarm. And the left were given stories and propaganda and told how to think about those complaints and those alarms, because those were real alarms. They were real and valid concerns, and we were basically told to ignore them, and most of us did.
I think that's a good time to come back to, because we barely touched on it. I know you wanted to talk about it. And even though I said we're coming up on an hour and I was going to try and wrap things up, I think when I start editing this out, I'm going to be like, oh, crap, we didn't talk about this enough. Complacency. We barely touched on it. You started to a couple of times, and I think I interrupted you.
I think I got to what I kind of wanted to say. The people are on my income level and certainly above me. We're not feeling that squeeze as acutely as people in more rural areas. It's what's being taken from our productivity, what we are not seeing in wage growth, is less of an impact to us. And sure, we'll try to make a better deal when we're buying a car and making a big purchase and things like that. But we can still make those purchases, and a lot of people in America are choosing between food or prescription drugs, are choosing between gas of their car or clothes.
See, my brain was going a different direction when you were talking about that earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't remember which direction it was going then, but now that you put it back into how it's complacency. See, I was thinking when you said complacency early, I was thinking average, everyday Main Street Joe just being complacent in who they're voting for or their political habits. That's where I was thinking we were going with complacency.
There's a lot of that too. The think tanks have been designed to work on influencing public opinion to favor the wealthy, and they target campaigns. They target public thinking ideas in different wealth ranges with different goals. But a lot of people have been affected by the thought that my vote doesn't really matter. How often have you heard that, especially recently?
Way too often. Way too often.
My vote doesn't matter. That is a combination of foreign intelligence operations using social media to promote that sort of thinking. But it's also very useful for the oligarchy, and they leverage that as well, because that disengages voters. That's the almost a third of our population, even a little over a third of our population, that isn't even registered to vote, even though they're of voting age.
And you know who never misses an opportunity to vote? The oligarchy. Yeah. The guy who owns the company, the manager, they never miss an opportunity to vote because they know their vote counts.
Yeah.
All right. Last question, just for fun. Where was I? All right. Not so much for fun, but I want to end it on this question. What is one thing, if you had to pick one thing that you wish every American understood about the times that we're living in right now, what would it be?
The power that the Constitution puts in the hands of the people. Those first 3 words. We're the management. We the people of the United States. And you probably already have the Schoolhouse Rock song singing it in your head now, as you remember. We the people are the management. The goal of the government is to form a more perfect union. They were speaking of the Union of the States. And they gave those 5 basic goals: establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the blessings of liberty. The rest of the conversation talks about parameters and division of power and things like that. And business, the wealthy, the think tanks have used the Constitution to take power away from us because they point to parts of the Constitution that are relevant to what they want to do, and they ignore the first part of the Constitution that says who's supposed to benefit from all of this.
That was the perfect answer as far as I'm concerned. And I am going to end this episode on the perfect answer. Steve, thank you so much for joining me. It was definitely an honor. I think we're going to have more conversations in the future. I'm definitely going to keep reading your stuff. And I'm going to put your Substack page up there again. Folks, there it is. Steve Anderson, at S Anderson 1581 on Substack. If you're not subscribed to him, you really should. It's really high quality writing. And I wish I had a way to make more Americans, all Americans, read the stuff that you're writing, because I think it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Valuable and intelligent writing. So it's not
salient.
It's not hyperbolic. You're not out there saying, Trump bad, Biden good, Biden bad, Trump good. You're not doing that kind of stuff. You're simply presenting the arguments and the history and the psychology of it all. And that's what I find so valuable about it. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you.
All right, folks, I thought I had a guest lined up for next week, but when I reached out to her and said, hey, let me know, she's like, I can't commit. I'm just too pressed for time. So I'm still hoping to get her. I'll let you know if I do. I guess that's the end of the show. Thank you for giving me your time. I hope I made it worth your while. Good day. Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm Resistor Vic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also resistorvic@gmail.com. Thanks again.